What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So, over the weekend, the news about Dan Lanning leaving UGA for Oregon broke, with some controversy regarding the legitimacy of the reports, but it is now finally official. Dan Lanning, at age 35, will take over the Oregon program, but will also remain with Georgia for the remainder of the season and playoffs, just playoffs at this point, with Glenn Schumann and Will Muschamp stepping up to act as co-defensive coordinators to assist Dan going forward. So, what does this mean for Georgia and for Oregon and also for Dan Lanning himself going forward? Well, let's start with what it means for Oregon and also Dan Lanning. I want to start by just congratulating Dan for landing a top-level job at such a young age, and I want to wish him the absolute best during his time at Oregon. I feel like Oregon got a potentially great coach, and by all accounts, Lanning is an incredibly hard worker who is full of passion and energy for the game and also for the kids he coaches, which is really, really important, even more so, in my opinion, than being passionate about the game. You need to be passionate about the kids that you're coaching, and they can really tell that, and that makes a huge difference, not just on the field and with your coaching, but also in recruiting. Like I said, that kind of branches to the next thing. We know he is an elite level recruiter and that he's a very bright young defensive mind. He's sort of been molded by Kirby Smart mainly, most recently going forward, and I think that is something that should be exciting considering how well Kirby's defenses have performed recently. It'll be interesting to see if he tries to be the head coach and the defensive coordinator, which is a thing that a lot of offensive-minded head coaches do, where they're the head coach and the offensive coordinator. I don't think he'll do that, but it'll be interesting to see. And if he does hire a defensive coordinator, who is it? How involved is he going to be with the defense? How involved is the coordinator going to be? Is it going to be one of those where the coordinator is kind of a coordinator in name only? Or is he really going to give him full autonomy over the defense? I'm sure Dan will be pretty hands-on with defense regardless of how he decides to staff it and run it. But it'll be interesting just to see some intricacies and some little details about how that all plays out. But I think the biggest importance for him is to just hire a veteran staff around him to help balance out the youth and inexperience that he has as a coach on the one hand, with a more veteran and I guess more seasoned approach to coaching and recruiting and building a program on your own. So I think that'll definitely be of big benefit to him. It's not too dissimilar actually from how Kirby Smart built his coaching staff at Georgia by getting very experienced coaches, some coaches who have been former head coaches, especially even now. Kirby, even now after being a head coach for a few years, he brought in Muschamp as an analyst. He has Matt Luke as the offensive line coach, who's a former head coach as well. So I think that'll be very important for him. Side by side with that, I think his OC hire will also be very important. Who he brings in as the offensive coordinator will be the most important individual hire that he makes, I feel like, because he's such a defensive-minded coach. Getting a good offensive coordinator is vital to his early on success at Oregon. I think we can kind of assume, at least assuming he's going to be a good coach, you can assume his defenses will be good sort of regardless of who the coordinator he hires is, but his offenses is not something that he's really touched. So that's going to be very, very critical that he gets a good offensive coordinator who can kind of run that whole system on their own. They don't need too much help because that coordinator will have a much larger impact in all likelihood on the actual on-field product, more so than a defensive coordinator would. I'll also be excited to see what kind of offensive coordinator he goes with. If he goes with more of the new school modernized offense, or if he kind of does, more of a conservative run game offense approach, kind of similar to what Oregon's had with Mario Cristobal, to be honest, although Cristobal tried to branch out a little bit later on. But I think a lot of Oregon fans will tell you they're a little disappointed with just how conservative Cristobal could be at times. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes. From what I can gather, and I don't know him, and I don't obviously know for sure, but from what I can gather, he seems to be very much on the modernization of football, both offensively and defensively. So I think that would probably lend itself to being a little more likely that he would go with more of a modernized offense, and especially in the Pac-12, that's kind of, I think it'll be more beneficial over there with the kind of recruiting base he'll have. And now with Lincoln Riley at USC, they're probably going to need to get some offense going quick. But anyway, that I think will be the biggest individual hire that he'll have to make, and will certainly be very interesting for me to watch. Also very interesting for me to watch will be how good of a recruiting class he puts together in this first year. I mean, he has basically 3 to 5 days to put together a recruiting class before early signing day hits. And I know early signing day isn't the last signing day, but like 80-90% of the guys who sign on early signing day. So it gives him a very, very, very short window to put together most of what his class is going to be. Now, the transfer portal will certainly alleviate that, especially with how many kids are in the portal right now. That'll give him a better opportunity to sort of delve into the portal and fill some gaps that he feels that they may have. But him building a class will be very interesting. I doubt he's going to pull many, if any, recruits from Georgia's class with him, although he could maybe bring a couple. Could also bring some current players on Georgia's roster, maybe some more depth players that aren't seeing the field that much, who have talent but are just inexperienced for now. He might be able to bring some of them with him to Oregon in the portal, but I wouldn't really count too much on many guys coming with him. As good as Dan Lanning has been, he isn't like it's not as big of a loss to me as like a Brent Venables was for Clemson. He hasn't been there quite as long as Venables was, and Kirby kind of has his stamp on that defense. Lanning runs it as well, and he runs it very well. He's a great assistant, but he isn't why kids commit to the program necessarily, I feel like. So it's going to be interesting to see. Also, it doesn't help him that he's going all the way across the country to Oregon instead of just staying nearby. A lot of those kids might be kind of hard to pull them all the way across country and all. And Georgia is currently in the playoff. It's going to be difficult for him to pull people from the current Georgia class or from the current Georgia roster. But he may get a couple. I just wouldn't count on him bringing a bunch of guys with him like Lincoln Riley's going to be able to do from Oklahoma and from the Oklahoma class. I wouldn't bet on seeing the same effect with Dan Lanning to Oregon. So yeah, big interest in how he will be able to put together that class, and then also, like I said, the OC hire going to be very interesting, and what sort of approach, not just who he hires, but what sort of offensive approach he wants to tailor around. How modern is it? Is it more of a run base, off spread base? Is it going to be balanced and depend on the personnel you have? And it's not like he's getting an empty cupboard. He's getting a very good team. So long term, I do feel that Lanning will have pretty huge success as far as building a culture goes, which is very, very important. Building the culture is super important. If you look at Sam Pittman, for example, in Arkansas, people kind of made fun of them for making that hire, and yet he fits their culture so well, and he built such a strong culture. He turned them into a winner very quick. Mel Tucker built a great culture at Michigan State. Shane Beamer's doing it at South Carolina. I mean, they're not as successful as Oregon would like to be or anything. They don't have that kind of talent. But building the culture makes recruiting easier because you're being genuine. You're not selling kids a pipe dream. It is legitimately what you believe. You're legitimately selling a culture. That culture and that chemistry and that unity that he can certainly help inspire. But Oregon, I think he's going to be great for that. I would absolutely have no concerns about him building a good culture and starting to just get the basis of a program going, which it's not like Oregon needs a total rebuild or anything. It's just any new coach is going to bring their own culture, their own schemes, their own identity to a team, and I think Lanning will do a really good job as far as that is concerned. I also feel like he's going to do a great job at recruiting elite level guys, which Oregon has been doing. I think he's going to at least keep that up at the same level. He may even raise it some. He is an absolute ace recruiter. It will depend on his staff to some extent and some of his early on-field success, but also with the Pac-12 being as down as it is right now, he shouldn't have too much competition in the recruiting scape outside, obviously, of USC and Lincoln Riley. They're going to be the number one competition for him out there on the West Coast, short of teams like Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, pulling kids away from the West Coast. But I think he'll do very good in recruiting early on, long term. I don't foresee any issues there. I think that goes hand in hand with building his culture, and I think that'll allow Oregon to continue to be a pretty consistent contender in the Pac-12 in the long run. There may be some early growing pains and struggles with a brand new head coach, never been a head coach before. Even Kirby, who's done really well at Georgia, when he first got there and went 7-6, is really difficult for a first-year head coach to just pick it up and be like, no, yeah, I can be a great head coach year one. There's a lot you have to learn, no matter who you've mentored under. Being a first-time head coach is a big step up, especially at a program like Oregon. It's a massive program. There's so many moving parts, so many things you have to follow and track. So there may, like I said, there may be some early growing pains, but don't get too worried about it. Give him some time, and I think Lanning can really build Oregon into a very consistent contender, at least at the level they're currently at. I think, honestly, he'll be able to elevate, and with how young he is, if you can get him to start to elevate, and he turns out to be a slam dunk hire, you can keep him around long term and really, really turn some good years out of this hire. The competition, like I said, in the Pac-12 should also help you out. There's really not much competition there, short of Utah, and then also first-year head coach. Well, not first-year head coach, but first year at his program in Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley's definitely going to have a head start on Lanning because, A, he's been a head coach before, B, he's going to already pull a bunch of players from the current Oklahoma roster and from the recruiting classes that he's been able to build up. May have been some sketchy things going on behind the scenes there, depending on who you ask, but that's not the point of this video. But yeah, the point is that he should have a relatively easy time in the Pac-12 as long as he can keep pace with Lincoln Riley to some extent. Now, Lincoln Riley has some huge advantages, like I said, and he also has the advantage that USC is just a bigger brand than Oregon. Oregon is a massive brand. Don't think I'm trying to dunk on Oregon as a brand or anything. They're a huge brand. They're a great program. USC is just a little different. You know, they have so much being in Southern California, the history they have. It's been a little while, but, I mean, you get that program rolling and the recruits in-state. It's ridiculous how dominant USC could become. And so if Lincoln Riley can do that, then, you know, kind of all bets are off at that point. But I think Dan Lanning getting there now can really help slow that down some. And if Utah can continue to be pretty good, I don't expect Utah to continue, or not to continue, but to compete in the recruiting world with the USCs and the Oregons of the world, but they consistently field a very good team on the field. And look, they just beat Oregon twice, basically in a row. So they're a very good team. If they continue to do that, they can also help slow down, at least pump the brakes on some of this USC talk with how good and dominant it looks like they have a chance to be. So that is also super exciting to me to see sort of how some of those recruiting battles on the West Coast go down now with Lanning and Riley over there, not just between the West Coast and teams pulling kids to the East Coast who are, you know, growing up and playing high school over on the West Coast, but also just between Oregon and USC, who's going to recruit at a higher level there and who's going to have more on-field success. So I think that'll be a very interesting thing to watch. But just overall, it's far too early to judge Lanning's impact on the Pac-12 and therefore college football as a whole, because he does legitimately have a chance to really impact college football as a whole and the whole Pac-12, depending on what he does at Oregon. Oregon is a legit program, and you know, you get the right guy running that, you get some pieces to fall the right way. You kind of, if you can prevent USC from going crazy, you can really, you know, string together a playoff appearance or two. All of a sudden, you can really start to shape a lot of the conversation around college football as a whole. But like I said, way too early to really build any assumptions or knowledge off of that. We have to see who he's going to hire as a staff, how he's going to perform, what his recruiting classes are going to be like. Just, I would still, though, it's a super interesting hire as a whole for a lot of the stuff I just mentioned. But overall, I would still call this a great or an elite level hire, honestly. You know, especially compared to like a Chip Kelly. I feel like this is a much, much, much better hire than a Chip Kelly would have been. Obviously, I mean, there's a Lane Kiffin. You can toss that around. I don't think there was any real shot Lane was going to come to Oregon, and I don't know how long-term of a solution that would be. I think Dan Lanning was a great hire, is the point that I'm trying to make. I think he was a great hire. I think that if you just give him time, he can really build a winner there, and we'll be able to see how it all pans out going forward. But now, what does this mean for Georgia? Well, Dan will certainly be missed on the Georgia staff, but honestly, Kirby has built that program like a well-oiled machine to this point, and it should just keep on churning along for the most part. I don't expect to see many, if any, decommits from Georgia, like I was saying earlier. I don't expect many big-time transfers from Georgia, maybe a couple. Just don't see much happening there, though, honestly. Nothing that's going to really shift the trajectory of the program. Also, both Glenn Schumann and Will Muschamp are elite-level recruiters in their own right. They're also beloved by the players. They're very highly talented. You know, they're going to be just fine stepping in long-term, because I believe the long-term plan for Georgia is to run with both of them as co-coordinators. It's either going to be that or they're going to name one as the actual coordinator and one as a co-coordinator. Regardless, both of them going to be very good in their own right. Elite level recruiters, very good coaches. Muschamp's been an SEC head coach at 2 other programs, and while his tenures were rocky to say the least, that experience is still invaluable to Georgia, especially in times like this when there's so much turmoil around. Having that other head coaching experience on your staff is super helpful. And with Kirby alongside him and Schumann alongside him, I have no doubt the Georgia defense will be just fine going forward. Also, Schumann's only 31, Lanning's only 35, but Schumann's even younger at only 31, and he's been with Georgia since 2016, so that's a long time for a guy that young to be with a program as big as Georgia. And as the inside linebackers coach, he's coached guys like Channing Tindall, Roquan Smith, Monty Rice, Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, just to name a few. And he's another fast-rising name in the assistant coaching world, and he's likely going to bring just as much juice and youthful energy and enthusiasm that Lanning does. He already does it as a position coach, but he'll likely bring that as a co-coordinator as well. And with Kirby as the head coach, he was one of the best defensive coordinators when he back in his day as a defensive coordinator. I'm really not concerned at all about the Georgia defense, and I don't think they're gonna suffer much. They will miss Lanning. He was a star assistant. He's a great coordinator, and definitely going to feel his loss to some extent, but I think it's one of those wish him the best, love him, wish we could keep him. Also, not going to fight too hard, or not going to lose too much sleep about letting him leave. He's a great coordinator. Would absolutely love to have him and keep him. We knew he was going to end up leaving to be a head coach soon, and just is what it is. Congratulate him and move on from there. To me, the most precarious or the most interesting thing to watch on the Georgia end of this is just how well he handles the college football playoff while also managing the duties of being Oregon's head coach simultaneously, with early signing day coming up, with the portal being so hot, with the late signing day in February and the playoff running all the way into January. That's a lot to juggle for a new head coach, especially one who's never been a head coach before. But I think with Kirby, he's been in this exact situation himself when he took the Georgia job. He coached Alabama as the DC through the playoffs. So he kind of knows a lot about what goes into this sort of a situation, and I think can really help Lanning through that and can help him juggle those duties on balancing Oregon with Georgia, recruiting for Oregon with continuing to coach at Georgia, and stuff like that. And I think also you can already see that Kirby knows how hard this was for him by his action of promoting Muschamp and Schumann to co-coordinator, because that takes a lot off of Lanning's plate. Lanning is still the main coordinator for the playoff, but giving him 2 co-coordinators like that, I think it certainly shows that Kirby knows how difficult this can be and is willing to help Lanning through it. And I think that'll help reduce to an extent what the negative impacts of Lanning trying to juggle so many responsibilities he can have going forward. So hopefully this doesn't affect Georgia too much in the playoffs, because I don't want this to be the reason that we get a worse game in the first round of the playoffs. I don't think it will. I fully expect Kirby to keep his team focused, keep his staff focused on the playoff going forward. And I don't think Georgia, long-term or short-term, is going to see too many repercussions of this. So, with all that being said, I find the hire incredibly interesting. I can't wait to see how it unfolds down the line, especially now Georgia and Oregon open the season against each other in Atlanta in 2022. So now that game will have even more intrigue going into the season, with Lanning matching up against his old team in Georgia. Going to be super interesting. It was already going to be a great game. Now it's got even more intrigue for it. Overall, just a great hire by Oregon. Hopefully make the Pac-12 more competitive and stop Lincoln Riley from turning USC into just a juggernaut with a cakewalk path in the Pac-12. But anyway, that basically covers all my initial thoughts on the hire. Let me know what you guys think about the hire, Coach Lanning, or the impact it's going to have on either the Oregon or Georgia programs down below in the comment section. And if you have made it this far in the video, go ahead and leave a like. Subscribe to the channel for more college football content like this in the future, because I will continue to be uploading. Check out the other videos on the channel and all. And just thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you all next time.